The doorbell rang on what should have been a peaceful Saturday morning. I just poured my coffee, still in my pajamas after a grueling work week, when I opened the door to find two small figures on my doorstep, my nephews, ages 10 and 7, clutching overnight bags with confusion written across their faces. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my heart already sinking. "Mom said you're watching us," my oldest nephew replied, his voice small. "She's going on vacation for 8 weeks." 8 weeks. My sister hadn't spoken to me since our family's 4th of July barbecue, where she'd made her usual cutting remarks about my weight. Now she dumped her children on my doorstep like unwanted packages. This is the story of how my golden child sister nearly destroyed my life, and how two little boys taught me what family really means. Growing up, my sister was everything I wasn't. Stunningly beautiful with thick, curly hair and light eyes that seemed to catch every ray of sunlight. I had dark eyes and straight hair, unremarkable in every way that mattered to my mother. "Why can't you dress more like your sister?" Mom would ask, her voice dripping with disappointment. "Maybe she could teach you about makeup." But when I'd approach my sister for help, she'd laugh. "You can't polish a turd," she'd say, then skip away to whatever party or date awaited her. My sister was the miracle child, the firstborn who could do no wrong. When she bullied me, my parents turned a blind eye. When she slept with my boyfriend during senior year, not because she liked him, but simply because she could, my parents told me to let bygones be bygones. The night I found out about the betrayal, I sat in my room writing in my journal until sunrise. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. I would channel every ounce of pain into becoming something they couldn't ignore or dismiss. I would succeed despite them. High school became my battlefield. While my sister partied her way through mediocre grades, I buried myself in textbooks. The studying paid off. I graduated with a perfect 4.0 and earned a full scholarship to my dream university. I'll never forget rushing home that day, my acceptance letter crumpled from my excited grip. For once, I had something my sister didn't. Something that proved I was worth something. "I got it." I burst through the front door. "A full ride to State University." Dad looked up from his newspaper. "Good job," he said flatly, then returned to reading. Mom didn't even glance up from her phone. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I stood there, scholarship letter trembling in my hands, waiting for something, anything, that resembled pride or joy. Instead, my mother ignored me for an entire week. When I tried to ask why she was angry about my scholarship, she'd literally walk into another room. That night, I cried myself to sleep, finally understanding a horrible truth. My mother didn't just prefer my sister. She actively resented my success. Every achievement I earned was a reminder that her golden child wasn't perfect, and she hated me for it. College became my salvation. Away from the toxic dynamics of home, I thrived. I graduated with honors, landed an internship that turned into a dream job, and by 23, I was making six figures. I bought a beautiful house, traveled, wore designer clothes, built the life I dreamed of during those lonely teenage nights. But even as an adult, family gatherings remained minefields. During one Christmas dinner, my uncle congratulated me on a promotion. As I began sharing details about potentially buying my first house, my mother cut me off. "This is boring. Can we change the conversation?" Then under her breath, "It's probably not even true anyway." Meanwhile, my sister's life spiraled. She dropped out of college after getting pregnant by a boyfriend she'd known for 4 months. 2 kids with a man who couldn't even remember my name at family gatherings. But somehow she remained the golden child in my mother's eyes. Which brings me back to that Saturday morning, staring at my confused nephews on my doorstep. I let them inside while frantically calling my sister. She ignored my first 10 calls, but I kept dialing until she finally answered. "There's no way I'm watching your kids," I said the moment she picked up. "If you're not here to get them immediately, I'm calling Child Protective Services." Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "I'll call your job and tell them you're not taking your bipolar medication. I'll get you fired." My blood turned to ice. My career was everything to me. The one thing I'd built that they couldn't touch. Or so I thought. "You have until tonight to figure this out," she hissed, then hung up. I stared at my phone. Trapped. My trip to Australia to meet my boyfriend's family was a month away, a trip I'd been planning for over a year. Now my sister's children were my responsibility, and she was threatening to destroy my career if I didn't comply. When I called my mother for help, she arrived with the same cold eyes I'd known my entire life. As we sat in my living room, she lectured me about being an awful sibling and how family should be there for each other. What kind of vacation is so important that she'd abandon her children? I demanded. My mother's face changed, and finally she admitted the truth. She's not on vacation. She's with her sugar daddy. He flew her out for 8 weeks. I stared at her in disbelief. And you think this is okay? Of course she did. She defended my sister as always, even calling me the ugly duckling who would always be ugly compared to my sister. When I screamed at her to leave, she shoved me into my coffee table, shattering a vase my boyfriend had given me. The sound of breaking glass felt like my heart splitting open. That night, as I ordered takeout for my nephews and watched them play video games, something shifted. These weren't just my sister's children. They were innocent kids caught in her chaos. Over the next few days, we bonded in ways I never expected. When I took them shopping and bought them clothes that actually fit, my youngest nephew, missing his 2 front teeth, gave me the most genuine smile I'd ever seen. "Why are you being so nice to us?" my older nephew asked through tears on our drive home. "Because you're my boys too," I told him, "and every kid deserves to be happy." That's when he broke down completely. "I'm angry at Mom for keeping us apart." My heart shattered. These children had been starved of love and stability, just like I had been. But unlike me, they wouldn't have to face it alone. My boyfriend suggested I record my next conversation with my sister to document her threats. When I called her again and mentioned CPS, she exploded. "I'll tell them you're crazy. Nobody will believe a sick freak like you. You don't deserve your job anyway." I had her threats on audio now. The next morning, I called CPS and reported everything. The abandonment, the blackmail, the threats. The agent listened to my recording and immediately opened an investigation. But I knew my sister wouldn't go down without a fight. Sure enough, 2 days later, I was called into an urgent meeting at work. My supervisors sat across from me with suspicion in their eyes. "We've been contacted by a family member," they said. "They claim you're unmedicated for a severe mental illness and pose a risk to workplace safety." I smiled and opened my briefcase. Inside were medical documents I'd prepared weeks earlier. Letters from my doctor, psychiatrist, and therapist, plus 5 years of prescription records proving I'd never missed a medication pickup. "These claims are completely false," I said calmly, spreading the paperwork across the table. "As you can see, I have documentation of my mental health stability from multiple physicians." The meeting lasted 15 minutes. My supervisors apologized for the inconvenience and even congratulated me on my recent successful quarter. I left the office laughing. My sister's plan had backfired spectacularly. When I called to tell my sister about the failed sabotage, she was enraged. "I'm getting on the first plane home," she snarled. "You're going to regret everything you've done to me." I was still laughing, but deep down, I knew she was dangerous. This wasn't over. 3 days later, my worst fears came true. The pounding on my door at 8 a.m. sounded like someone hitting a sandbag. When I opened it, my sister stood there with a man who had to be 6 feet 5 inches and nearly 300 pounds. My mother lurked behind them. Before I could speak, the giant shoved me to the ground with one massive hand. They barged into my house as I collapsed, pain shooting through my shoulder. "Get the kids!" my sister barked at the man. My nephews emerged from their room, sleepy and confused. When they realized what was happening, they started begging their mother to leave them with me. "Please, Mom, we want to stay with Auntie." But the man was already scooping them up. When I tried to protect my oldest nephew, the stranger grabbed my head and slammed it into the wall. Stars exploded across my vision as I crumpled to the floor. The last thing I saw was my sister walking over to me. She looked down at me with pure hatred, then spit directly in my face. They left with my nephews. No shoes, no breakfast, none of their belongings. Just 2 terrified little boys being dragged away by their unstable mother and a violent stranger. Through my concussion and panic, I managed to call 911. Thankfully, the police were already aware of the CPS investigation. I gave them every detail I could remember: the license plate, the man's description, what everyone was wearing. Hours later, they found them. The confrontation had been chaos. Even with guns drawn, the giant had charged at officers. My sister had physically attacked the cops trying to arrest her. Both were now behind bars, facing multiple charges. But my nephews were in CPS custody, and I was flying to Australia in less than a week. Despite everything, I went to Australia. My boyfriend met me at the airport and swept me into his arms, and for the first time in weeks, I felt safe. His family was wonderful, warm, active people who took me hiking and sightseeing. One afternoon, my boyfriend took me to his secret waterfall. We skinny dipped and kissed under the cascading water, and I realized that even in the darkest chaos, love could still find a way to heal. But I knew when I returned home, the real battle would begin. Back in the States, I pressed charges against both my sister and mother for breaking and entering. The CPS investigation concluded with my sister losing custody permanently. That's when I made my decision. I would fight for full custody of my nephews. The legal battle consumed nearly 2 years of my life. My sister was eventually sentenced to life in prison after all her charges stacked up. My mother avoided jail only by testifying against her golden child, the ultimate betrayal that gave me the sweetest satisfaction I'd ever felt. The custody fight dragged on as the boy's father tried to claim them, but I never wavered. These weren't just my nephews anymore. They were my sons in every way that mattered. The day I finally won custody, I decorated bedrooms in my house for each boy. When they walked through the door and saw what I'd prepared for them, they smiled wider than I'd ever seen. I surprised my youngest with his beloved stuffed dog, the one he'd been forced to leave behind during that horrible morning months earlier. He collapsed into my arms and my oldest nephew joined us. As both boys cried into my hair, my eldest looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. "I knew it, Auntie," he whispered. "I just knew you would come back for us." In that moment, I understood something profound. Family isn't about blood or golden children or who gets the most love. It's about showing up, fighting for each other, and choosing to love even when it's hard. My sister had spent her whole life taking everything she wanted, but in the end, the two most precious things in her world chose me instead. And unlike fool's gold, real love doesn't tarnish with time. It only grows stronger. That's all for today's story. Hope you enjoyed the ride. If you did, give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button to help me reach my first 1,000 subscribers. It really means a lot. And hey, if you're still craving more drama, mystery, or chaos, check out the next story right here on the screen. See you in the next one.